The following podcast may be explicit. One Joe Young presents Adventures from the Shed, a tabletop RPG podcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Happy New Year and welcome to 2017 with Adventures from the Shed. We got to talking about trying new things and making changes at the RPG gaming table, and we decided it might be a good sidebar to start the year. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, and welcome back to the Shed for a special sidebar of Adventures from the Shed. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com, iTunes, Facebook, Stitcher Radio, Google Plus, being all over the place. Hey, it's going to be the new year when people hear this. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And our first person introduction of the year goes to the fabulous...
Hi, everyone. Fabulous.
Why
Mickie
not?
here. Happy New Year. Happy 2017.
Hey, it's Kurt. Glad to be here. Another year at the Shed.
Another one.
This is Chris. Greetings, Shed Heads.
I'm Joe, and because we're still in the same configuration for Curse of Strahd,
Exactly. So this is JJ.
all right, and I would like to say one of the things, or the topic, essentially the framework of this sidebar is talking about introducing new or change things within your RPG gaming table. And I'd like to take the opportunity to bring in the first new thing and officially say that Chris has joined us as a regular cast member, as our newest cast member of Adventures from the Shed. He has been on the last 6 episodes you've heard, but we'll make it official. Can we golf
And
clap?
there's much rejoicing.
Golf clap. Right up in the mic. There we go.
A round of applause.
So let's start with that, and part of this was Kurt's idea. Kurt, did you have any questions that you thought Chris should answer as a new player to a new group?
I've had a bunch of thoughts about newness in gaming, but one of them was just, what it would be like for Chris or anyone to come into a table for an already established game group. I think it's hard enough to start playing a new game generally or to join a new group that's starting, but to come into one where you don't necessarily know the people super well or where they've been playing for a year or two together. I was just curious what that's like and how, if at all, you kind of prepare for that.
For me, it was pretty easy, I think, because I knew Joe for a little bit, and I'm not new to gaming. So that was pretty easy to come in. It wasn't like, and I don't know, like the humor, I dig the humor already. So it's easy just to flow right into that.
That's kind of sad.
He's in the small subset of the population.
It's a little telling on my part, I guess, what people might think. But for me, that was pretty easy, and especially because I'm playing D&D when we coming in, it's pretty easy just to flow right into it. But nothing weird, I guess, on that part,
And he's cool because
I think it's a little bit different with us, too, because we have recordings of our sessions.
Right.
So, like, as a prospective gamer looking to join this particular table, at least,
we've already gotten to know you. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And he can put up with guys like me who show up totally prepared to play and then realize they have no dice, which is super sweet.
He's still using that newbie tag.
So, Chris has joined us. If our other listener happens to join us, they'll know what it's like, too, ahead of time. Anders Gustafsson, if you're listening and traveling to South Carolina in the United States anytime soon, you just let us know.
Come on. So
Names happened.
I don't want to shift gears necessarily, but part of what I was thinking with this is, so I'm trying to start a home game,
Yeah.
which I have never run. I've never been a long-term GM on anything, and I really want to GM for more than just a couple of sessions. So I'm going to start a home game, and it's really important to me to get a group that is fun, and I'd like to have just 4 players. So I probably know 10 or 12 people who would be interested if I approach them, but I want to kind of self-select out first and say, well, what am I looking for in new players that would make a fun group?
That's a good point. Let me ask you that, because you're starting to put it together. What type or personality type, goal-oriented people, what are you looking for in the players? You're looking to start a new game with new players. What type do you want at your table?
Right. So for me personally, we're not recording, so I'm not necessarily looking for people who are going to be exciting to a larger audience. But I want people who will show up regularly, because I think one of the challenges with adults is we all have other commitments, and knowing my friends, some of them are just super flakes. Like I have one guy.
Reliability is important.
Yeah, I have one guy who I think would be really fun, and I'm not going to invite him because he won't show up half the time, and it would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
So I think 1 is reliable. 2, I don't necessarily want people who know the game super well. In part because I don't. So, if I have 3 guys at the table who know every rule and every spell and already know what the resistances are that monsters have and how to beat them, then that's going to, I think, make it a lot less fun for me running the game. So, what I'd like is people who have some experience with gaming or with D&D enough to know that they enjoy it and that they're not going to be super weird about pretending to be an elf or a troll or a gnoll, but not that they remember, the range of Fireball. So, someone who played, first or second edition or maybe 3.5 a long time ago, but wasn't a rules lawyer is probably a good fit.
Yeah.
Or just someone who's fun and creative and doesn't mind trying something new.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is it beneficial, though, to have someone at the table who is kind of all into
There she
the
is.
rules? I'm pointing at James. Because that way, when there's a question, you can have kind of like a de facto expert.
I don't think it's important. I mean, if you're the DM, you kind of make it up as you go. You control the universe,
Right. So I have different thoughts about that. I think if you're trying to play a hardcore D&D game, you would want that, I think. I think what I want to do is really take people and run them through the starter set, at least to start. I want to view the D&D starter set, 5th edition, as the kind of probationary period for my group and say, look, we're going to put in 20 to 40 hours on this. And if you are not enjoying yourself after 2 or 3 sessions, I am more than happy to kill you and bring someone else in. Or
Bye, Felicia.
How about the
Damn.
characters? You're gonna kill the characters too?
kill the characters. Because I don't want anyone there out of a sense of obligation or who's not enjoying it. And the fact of the matter is at 40, 45 years old, which is the age of me and my friends, some people may think that something's going to be fun and then find that it's not.
That's true.
But even Joe had suggested
Old
he might
people.
want to play a few times, and I was even hesitant to ask him, just because he
doesn't like me.
No, it's not that. It's just
He didn't want to.
it's just a sense of, I think Joe might have a sense for, well, here's how the game should go, and I kind of unlike having the rules lawyer. Not that you are a rules lawyer. I want the sense to be able to just wing it and just make that rule up and not necessarily have anyone care. Kind of like the way you play Dungeon World. Sounds good. That would be fun. Let's see what
do it.
happens.
Let's see what happens.
And I do think 5e allows that if no one cares too much.
Yeah, I mean, especially at lower levels, I would say. Yeah.
Right. And I want to be very liberal with advantage, disadvantage, and with inspiration and some of those things that I think are pretty cool.
So you're talking about a new game with an established scenario, the starter set.
Right.
So
Just 'cause I
you
think-
don't want to have everything new. You want to be able to have some comfort zone for yourself.
Correct. One, I have a little bit of comfort with it. Yeah. Two, it gives us pre-gen character sheets, which I think for a first adventure is not bad. And I'm willing to let people modify the backstories and stuff a little bit if they really want to. And then if people enjoy that, then we would go on to another 5e adventure, either homebrewed or loosely based on a published adventure. Or depending on how the group went, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to maybe a Dungeon World type game. But my goal would not be to play a bunch of different things. It would probably be to have a 5e game. Yeah. And we're talking about playing once a month, twice a month at most. So,
Cool. How did you go about finding the new players? You said you had 10 people or so that you would actually ask. How did you determine those would be the new people?
Well, of the 10, there's probably a group that are social friends who would not be on the list. Other than that, when I talk about it and they're drunk, they seem to get excited. But I've actually been thinking about this over probably the last 8 or 9 months, and I've kind of felt people out. And I have a friend who is the husband of one of my wife's good friends who used to play a lot, but it's been 20 years, and he and I were out, having a beer at a party the other day. And when I talked about it, you could just kind of see him light up, and I was like, if I had a game and it was only once or twice a month, would you actually want to play it? He was like, if it was only no more than twice a month, he's like, I would definitely want to play it. And you could see he was really excited.
And he wasn't drunk at the time.
He was.
Nice.
Another person is a guy I actually don't know that well. He's a client of mine and happens to have an office nearby. And I was when I talk about D&D, I'm always a little, I'm like, look, I do this,
Little
he said, "What are you doing this
the
weekend?"
Closet nerd out.
Yeah, it was like, "What are you doing this weekend?" And so I have this way that I kind of describe it. I'm like, "Well, I've got this game group I play with. It's really fun. It's kind of weird, but we have a great time." And he's like, "Oh, what do you play?" And I'm like, "Well, we do different tabletop games, but a lot of D&D
Hide the
stuff."
penis.
And exactly, hide the
See how many we
penis.
can stick between our fingers.
And 3 out of 4
I got up to,
people,
what, 8?
when you say I have a game group, I'm going to spend all day Saturday playing D&D with. They look at you kind of like, oh,
That's a very
whatever.
different.
But 1 out of 4 is like, oh man, that's awesome. And this guy's telling me about how he listens to Critical Role and he listens to watches Force Grey, but he's never played the game. I was like, wait, you watch D&D
that's
videos
pretty
on
crazy.
YouTube, multiple D&D videos on YouTube, and you've never played? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'd love to. He's like, I don't know anyone to play with. He's like, I've just never been
And
involved.
that's a huge issue. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, done. So, he's got 3 kids, one of whom is a new baby. I was like, dude, if you want 2 nights out a month, I was like,
Yeah.
I already like you. Like, I'm going to have a game.
That's cool.
And he'll know nothing about it other than just what he's seen. So
Perfect.
It's definitely more receptive to people. It's like gaming has come to the mainstream now.
It
definitely
is.
has.
And even the old school
Right.
RPGs.
It's grown up.
Now, the problem I will say is I truly do prefer having women
Yeah.
at the like in everything I do, but particularly at the table. And the dynamic on this one, just knowing the way it's going, if I want to keep it to 4 players, it'll probably end up being all guys, which bums me out because I could fill the 4th spot with a girl, but it would be a random thing, and I don't think that would be necessarily a good dynamic.
And not much of a chance of your wife joining in there?
I don't think so.
She doesn't really like doing things with you anyway.
No, she doesn't like me at all.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I still have to think about that. But let's
Now-
put it that way. If you play, there won't be room for a lady.
Well, if you,
Nice.
no, I'm not going to go there.
Now,
Thank you,
I'm
Mickey.
curious what happens if, like, you stated you don't want exactly a rules lawyer, but even as a new player, you pretty much dove wholesale into the books and started reading them.
Right.
And that was much my experience when I first started playing too. Like I'll freely admit, I owned a digital version of the 3.5 books long before I finally bought all of them.
Right.
And I dove wholesale into it, and like I was reading a book or two a night until like in between game sessions and trying to, and then it got to the point where like, you know, as soon as a DM would make a description, it's like, oh, that's a zombie or, you know, whatever it was. So I was like,
Right.
make sure you use slashing, guys.
Right.
And, you know, so what happens if you get someone who's that excited about playing that they turn into the rules lawyer like I did?
What do you do?
That's a good question. I guess one, I mean, I will probably urge people not to do that too much. And knowing them, they're probably not going to have time to do that. But if not, I think it's just that question we have about how do you bring kind of metagame knowledge to the game. And just saying, look, like you've got to play it like your character would play it. If you were a level 2 dwarf who has never fought a vampire, never seen a vampire, you don't know what his vulnerabilities are. You don't know how to attack it, so you need to play it that way.
And I think that's also something that happens with new players is like they come up with this incredibly epic backstory, which doesn't work as a level 1 or 2
Yes,
character.
we did that a couple of times.
I've definitely done
here.
that myself. Well, and I think that's why the starter set is a good start. Because it's like, look,
You don't
there's
even need a
of-
backstory.
You don't need the backstory.
Yeah.
It's there with the rock seers or whatever their names are.
Rock Seeker.
Seekers.
You just missed a K.
Yeah, you've got enough to get started. But so we'll see. I'm excited to DM, though. I'm looking forward to it.
But I think if you set the expectations early in the game, you say, hey, this is for fun. You guys can go, full sail into the rules, but at the end of the day, we're here to have a good time. I think it'll work out.
Well, and to be honest, and people will totally disagree with me about this,
I disagree.
I
won't
I
disagree.
I will
disagree as
say
well.
it's more about the role playing and the character and the fun.
Wrong.
And combat's there, but like I have no problem fudging combat
Yeah.
or hit point. If it's dragging, I have no problem with the thing running away early
Oh, yeah.
or saying it's got 20 less hit points than the book says it has, if that keeps the game moving.
Yes.
So my home game would definitely be a game where, I think I would be trying to pace it such that everyone's having a good time and moving. And if the combat goes 20 minutes shorter than it would have otherwise gone, I don't care. So
Especially if you've got something to fill that in. And that, to me, that kind of leads to something else that I had typed in as a bullet here. But essentially, say you're running things a certain way and it's flowing, but then it starts to get stale. How do you come up with a new type of encounter or something for the game? And this could happen, I would say, in the starter set. If people just start wandering around Fandalen, they could start to get bored if they're not really talking to people and working things out. What do you think, JJ? How do you change up the way that things are going to try and bring excitement back into what could be a stale adventure?
So I think that's actually one of the harder things to judge as a beginner DM is because you are so preoccupied with running this world and you're having a blast, and it's hard to keep a pulse on the fingers of the other players of whether or not they're having fun. And I don't think I really cared about my players until maybe 2 or 3, campaigns in. Like, I don't think I really. There you go.
Thank you.
Couple of 20 dice or so.
Yeah.
Going through that tower. Yeah, I don't think I really cared about my players. Like, it was all about me. And if you had fun playing my game, then more power to you. But like, it was all about me initially, and I think as I grew as a DM, I started realizing that my players need to have fun with me, or else I'm just dictating to them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, because another part of this new topic that we're thinking about is how you introduce games to totally new players. And for me, that's kids. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they've been steeped in my geekness for a while. But we're getting to the point now where they can actually play for real. And how do you introduce this game to new people, whether it's adults like the guy who may join my group, or whether it's to your kids? Because that's what we have to do to keep the game vibrant and alive.
Yep.
You also have to be aware of attention span. How long is that going to last? Do you then have a 1-hour game session because it's with your kids rather than a 4-hour game session? Right.
I think, in my opinion, you have to introduce it from this fun aspect first. You can't go into rules. I think you have to start off with something that's relatable in an adventure. Like when we played with my niece and nephew, my nephew's a huge Potter fan. So we built a world of wizards where he was a wizard, and we just tailored the character sheets to what fit the story so they could draw the parallels.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier, where you kind of figure out what they're into and tailor it that way. If you want it more like fantasy magical or more horror based or whatever, what the group might be into already, so it's easier for them to flow into the play.
Right. Well, and with my kids, we've done a little bit of. We did the Pathfinder beginner box and stuff, and they definitely have the intellectual capacity to play D&D 5th edition, but we're going to do more Dungeon World, because I just want it to be about the story and about their imagination, and just tell me what you want to do. And I think even for hardcore gamers, the rules are there, I think, to facilitate the storytelling. I know some people disagree with that. They're really focused on combat and how to game, but they're essentially playing D&D as a tabletop war game.
Yeah.
And for me, I play it as a story game. And so for me, the rules are just there to help you tell a story about what the characters in the party are doing. And Dungeon World, I think, makes that even simpler. And I think Dungeon World can be very, very hard to DM as an adult for adults. You have to be very creative. You have to be very quick. I think Dungeon World has a lot of flaws in that I don't think it gives you the dopamine hit that you get from leveling up. You don't get as much power leveling up. You don't have the XP and the gold and things that for some of us give that sense of satisfaction from D&D. But I think for kids, especially on a short session, I think it's a great system.
Yeah. I don't know. I did. As you guys all know, Dungeon World's grown on me.
Oh no, I love Dungeon World. I love it.
So
I just wish
it's pretty epic.
I love Dungeon World. I just would like.
I'm a convert.
Before we mention that, I want to mention one more thing about the kids. Another piece of advice I would give, at least, is if you want your kids involved, try and let someone else run the game so that they don't have to see you as the person in charge.
Right.
That's
If possible,
a good point.
try and get somebody else.
Teenage rebellion.
Typically, your kids are more respectful to someone they don't know than yourself. So it can help in running a game.
Absolutely.
But yeah, go ahead and talk about Dungeon World, please.
It could be totally it could be really epic because the rules aren't, you don't get the hits like you said, that dopamine hit when you level up and you get to add new spells and new tricks and stuff.
It's a really good analogy
It's
too.
really awesome when you get to describe a battle and you're like, yeah, I did a backflip off the wall, did a little parkour, flipped over, pulled my swords out and slashed his head off.
The combat is more, to me, it's more realistic because it's more open. Where D&D, if we did it realistically, like a 1-minute fight would take an hour, and that's insane. But it's not how a fight works. You know?
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
horrible.
really like combat in Dungeon World because it's not initiative order based.
Yeah.
I just find that type of combat a little unrealistic. But
So let's
anyways,
take that along the idea of the new game system. When we were introduced to Dungeon World, it was a new system, and you had to learn new things. What other times has anyone here switched from one system to a new system, and how did that feel?
When we did it for the Alamond.
Yeah.
We
went
switched
from-
during the session, yeah.
and I felt betrayed.
Yeah, that had to be weird going. Like,
But we know-
you
I mean,
stay on the
at
same
the-
campaign, but you're switching game
Yeah.
systems.
what did we
At
do
the
there? We
time-
went 5e to Dungeon World.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the time, I mean, you said it on the air, too, that he didn't want to, but did it for the sake of moving forward.
Exactly.
Right. So that's another important aspect. If you're going to make a change, you don't necessarily need consensus, but at least majority and acceptance in order to make a change.
And that is another key with when you put group together for playing is you need people who recognize you're here for fun and that things are going, you have to be flexible and you have to, even if you disagree with what the party's doing, don't be a bitch about it.
Well, in this group, even though we have preferences, I think we've had fun trying totally new systems. Like, I really enjoyed seeing the way the Star Wars box worked, and with those dice that were totally different from what we use. Adara was fairly similar to.
Yeah,
D&D,
I
but it
just have a recommendation for any game developers out there. Just get rid of the grenades. No grenades.
Grenades sucked ass. And anything we've tried where you could just throw something and blow up, it was bad. It's just the off-air Shadowrun box set that we started was horrible with grenades. Star Wars was horrible with grenades. Gosh. But yeah, as a good point, none of us had played Idara before. None of us had played Star Wars before.
None of us played Tavern Tales.
We played that one. Kurt still hasn't. But
True.
we when we tried the new things, what was it that worked
Cthulhu.
well and what doesn't? Yeah, Trail of Cthulhu. Yep. Now none of them with Chris, of course.
Right.
Chris has played the same game both times he's been
Like
here.
Cthulhu, the gumshoe system was totally different, and I'm reading
Yeah.
the source book for Knights Black Agents now, which is a spy thriller game based on the gumshoe system by the same developers, and it's super interesting system. I don't know whether I would want to play it for years and years, but very different way of thinking about the purpose and the tactics of gaming.
After finals week, I plan to dive more wholesale into the Dresden Files.
Cool.
I would like for me to at least try to run a game here with that.
Sounds good. I know I was very excited about it until we looked at the magic stuff, and then we just felt we were
I'm trying
in over our heads.
in light of that. I am trying to figure out a way to simplify all that without having to basically sit here and handhold everybody during character creation.
Oh, come on. Then how else would we do it?
Well, that's the thing. It's that
Yeah.
like you must invest time right now as is in order to create a character in that campaign. So
It is pretty darn involved.
Yeah.
So to our listeners out there, if anyone has any good ideas on how they've
Yeah.
done this
Yeah.
for Dresden Files, please drop
Give
us
us
a note.
some new ideas.
I wanted to kind of bring it back to the idea of new people coming in or a new group forming. I browse D&D behind the screen and the D&D subreddit a lot, and one of the most popular posts is, "My DM did this. How do I fix it?" Or "My player just did this." And inevitably, the advice is always pull them aside and talk to them. Get
them.
feedback. Like, find out why your player is acting out, because it may be because you're doing something to make them angry. Like, you are railroading them, whatever it may be. Talk, you guys. I would assume that everybody listening to this podcast is an adult and knows how to have a conversation with another adult. I would assume that.
Yeah,
I hope
you're
so, because
mostly
otherwise all
accurate.
the four dicks jokes from the last episode are going to be
Kind
problematic.
of weird.
Yeah.
Please be an adult.
How many?
No, I mean-
how many? Daddy, what is it?
There's a rating.
I mean, isn't that the answer to most problems
is
in life
expensive.
and things that are hard?
Yeah.
Like, communicate.
Talk to them.
Have difficult
But-
conversations.
But taking that
That's not
as
always
advice when you start
reasonable.
is good too. I was mentioning off air before we started. I've just recently started up another game with 5 players at the table, and before we even started, not only were we chatting online, we had a little Facebook message group happening, but I insisted that we get together, the 6 of us get together for a meet and greet. And we sat around for 3 hours just talking and getting to know each other to actually see if the people were compatible. And then the next session, we talked about the game system and how we were going to build characters. We were 3 sessions before we started an adventure, just to make sure that we could talk to each other.
And I think that's the basis of a healthy gaming group.
That's good advice.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yep. Don't just rush into it. This isn't the podcast itself is another example where I actually went through the interviews ahead of time and talked to the people, felt we had a compatible group, and I think it ended up working out well,
We ended up
except for the guy who runs the thing.
I mean, Joe was very particular. It took almost 3 or 4 months to get back to 4 players.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
Yeah.
And
it's the
that's
dynamic.
how you keep the group alive, though.
Yeah, I didn't think we needed two bald guys, but one with facial hair and one without.
Yeah, but as long as we're sitting across from each other, reflections
I was
not
going to say
too
I could
bad.
grow mine back though.
Yeah.
and this
I also
could get
recommend
weird.
cuddling. Cuddling is very good, for
especially if you're a
group
sheep.
Bad.
Another thing that came up, JJ mentioned before we started, the idea of a new character, or more appropriately for what he was saying, somebody wants to change their character. So I got sick of my, insert character type here. I got sick of my rogue, and I've always wanted to play a ranger. How do I go about that? How do I make that change into something new in the middle of the game? Chris, what would you think? You've run enough games, I think.
I've never had anyone actually do that.
No.
You've had characters die, but I've never had somebody like, I'm sick of my character, or I don't feel like my character's doing anything. They might have that in like a session, but not enough to like, I need to change it up. That's a weird topic. I mean, I guess it'd be easy enough to write in if you want to have like an NPC that they could kind of take over or something maybe, or if they really had an idea for something, you could always, I don't know, it's always easy to write something in, but that's kind of, I've never had to deal with that. I don't know how you'd really want to. I've had characters like think about it before, but nobody's ever gone through with it.
I think it depends on how attached they are to the character. If it's a long-time character and they're like, I've done what I want to do with this one, I'd like to try something else. I think in a perfect world, maybe that player gets with the DM, and I'm just thinking for me, I would want that character to kind of go out in a blaze of glory. So maybe
You tried that with Truk every time.
Well, maybe you can plan something where, you actually kill the character, but it's a noble death, or he sacrifices himself for the party, or he does something that advances the mission or allows them to continue when they would not have otherwise been able to.
Like taking the darkness into herself.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Other times, if it's just relatively short term, and you're just like, I made a bad character choice here. There's a bunch of ways you can handle that, right? The character could go off and do something else, and to be brought back later if desired, and you could, essentially roll up a new one who comes in. But I think it's actually an important thing to consider on a long-term campaign.
So I like that you guys actually answered from the opposite of the perspective that I was posing it as. How do you handle the player? How do you handle that situation? I like the idea that you both talked about how the story continues, but that person wants to change a character. What do you, going back to talking to them, what do you talk to about? You want to make sure, my thought was you want to make sure that they're going to be happy with the new one they're picking. So try and figure out why they're dropping the old one.
Yes.
So if I'm dropping the rogue because all I can do is backstab, then I might not want the ranger because all I can do is shoot a bow, depending on the system, of course.
Right.
I'm oversimplifying.
Right.
But you try and help them work into something that they can enjoy. Find out why they didn't like it.
Right. Well, the character I'm playing right now in Strahd, I would be totally fine if we decided Teelan had to go and I started playing someone new, because I've not created him as a distinct character to the extent that I have with some of my ones in the past. So, and I feel like now 30 episodes in is kind of hard to say, well, let's talk about my backstory. Let's talk about how tormented I am. Let's talk about how I lost my love. And so it would almost be easier to be, I can either just keep playing him, recognizing his faults.
He's finding Paylor, though.
Yeah, exactly. But it would be fine if we said, you know what, I'd try a different class. Let's have Strahd kill him and bring in a druid or a bard or whatever. But I think that's just a player-by-player thing. And like you said, you need to understand why. Like in my case, it wouldn't be necessary that I want to try new mechanics. I actually like the sorcerer class. I think there's still a lot to learn there. I just don't feel like I've I haven't made him an interesting character. I don't really see that changing, so maybe I should try a different one.
So, go ahead.
No, but it should always be the player's choice, right? Because it almost sounded like you were saying...
Yeah.
Like, it should be the player's choice. I don't think that the rest of the group can impose their opinion or decision on one player, because that's how you lose people.
No, I agree with that.
So, let's talk about, actually, when Chris joined us. I sent him a couple of personal emails, and I was asking essentially, would you be willing, for the sake of the story, to be a were-raven? It would be the easiest way to facilitate a merging of the bringing him into the group. And
it certainly helped when he started. Just to interrupt for a moment, that he was introduced as a were-raven from the clan of Order of the Feather. And as soon as he said that, Mickey's like, "That's an awesome freaking name." So it helped right off the bat. Yeah,
exactly. So
Order
I mean,
of the
it's
Feather.
like. So for Chris, like, were you okay with me dictating that you were were-raven and?
Oh yeah, that's totally cool with me because I'm fine with like having something that I have to try to fit into, or because I might not have thought of that, and that's cool because it fits with the storyline too. So I never would have like, oh, I'm going to play Warrior. I never would have came up with that probably.
Okay.
But you asked.
I asked, and again, that's that whole feedback and talking
You have to
thing.
have some communication. You need communication.
Now, for me, the only time, and I can say the only time it's ever happened where players got sick of their characters has always been in evil campaigns. Like characters would be just like,
Funny.
dude, my guy, I can't stand being him anymore.
He's a real prick.
So like every time we've ever swapped classes like that, it's always been in evil campaigns. I very rarely in a normal heroic type setting have I ever seen like I can't stand playing this guy anymore.
For me, it's been the desire to try something different. Not so much being sick of a character, but being sick of a mechanic, like you put it, Kurt. That the mechanic is just I'm doing the same thing every time it comes to my turn. I'm doing exactly the same thing, and I really can't change it because this character sheet I have doesn't allow me to do anything different. And I want to try something different. So how do we do that?
I'm not so
There
sure.
used to be the whole multi-classing thing, which you can still do in D&D. Right. But then if you're overwhelmed by the mechanics already, now you've got twice as much. Not exactly, but enough to keep.
I love that in the Alaman campaign where I started Truk as a monk, and then he started to get the druid characteristics. Yeah. And so I essentially got to play a monk and a druid in one character who I did like and who I felt very attached to.
A druid and a monk, or a drunk.
A little drunk. He was a monk with a little druid in it.
He was.
But it's that was also, it made sense in terms of the story, and to some degree you built the story to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure we'll ever have that situation where one of us gets tired of a character simply because we're fairly ADHD with our campaigns.
I'm sick of freaking Calvin.
Are you really?
This guy never shut up about his, what is it?
Paylor.
Oh, that, yeah.
Change his name to Paylor and start talking about Calvin.
Ooh, there you go. Maybe he gets
He's
bopped on the
schizophrenic.
head.
Yeah, he's schizophrenic, man.
Yeah, and he'll start talking like a potted plant from Boston, Southie.
Potted plant. Okay. So what else? So that's how you build a group.
Yeah, one of the other things I was thinking of, and this may be more for myself and Chris and JJ, but the idea of introducing in your own campaigns a new NPC group, like a new evil villain and their minions. Something either to spice it up or to actually change a dynamic within the world. You're making a change, or maybe a big change to a storyline. How do you go about that?
For me, I don't know. I don't like just to have like one bad guy. And you know this maybe more like how I work things. I like to have this giant web of things going on where other bad guys will interfere with other bad guys' plans. So depending on the timeline where the heroes meet certain things, that maybe that got taken care of because the bad guys took care of it, or they've changed it this way, so now it's over here instead of over there. So I don't know. You kind of you try to keep it like a real world, like things. Some bad guys might help you out for a little bit because that's along their plans, and then they'll screw you over later.
Yeah.
Or even good guys, they're helping you out, but man, I got to do something bad for something good to happen. So they kind of get in the way of the party a little bit, and but man, they're still the good guys though. They're still good guys, but they make a mess of things. Just to keep it interesting.
I totally agree with that. I mean, if you think about Star Wars, I guess at the top you've got Emperor Palpatine, right? But you've got Darth Vader as a bad guy. You've got Boba Fett as maybe a bad guy. You've got Lando Calrissian as
the Hutts, right?
Huts. So you've got a whole
organized
web.
crime organizations, yeah.
Yep.
And that lets you get side quests or secondary quests, all of which can tie back.
And
to
you might have to make those alliances. Man, I got to make those alliances with this piece of crap dude. It's right. I mean, it happens in the real world. Like the CIA is I got to have these assets. These are horrible people, but I need to use them to go do something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think with Alaman, we actually handled that pretty well. So say the group is getting bored with their characters, whatever, and you want to spice things up. You make them the evil people. You make them the bad guys. And as a player, you want to succeed at whatever you're doing, right? So like if you change tacks, like so you're still in the same story world, and you've been playing the good guys, and now all of a sudden a DM says, "Hey, okay, we're gonna do a little evil mini game, and you guys are going to be trying to thwarting yourselves." And I think that could definitely, it would, one, allow them to play a whole new class.
Yeah.
Two, I mean, I think it would bring fresh perspective.
Allow them to braid human skin.
Exactly, braid human skin, and
that was one of the things I remember from that.
Be pooped out of demons.
But I mean, I think that idea would work very well in a campaign, and I'm very glad I just thought of it, and I've never done it before, so I think that'd be interesting to have, like, you guys be, Strahd's minions or something, and now you're going to go try to kill yourselves.
We could go kill were-ravens.
exactly.
Like, stop punching yourself. Stop
like,
punching yourself.
Just something like that. It's like I think that would be a good way to basically breathe new life into a group that might be flagging a little bit.
Interesting.
That was a great idea.
One more thing about bringing new people in or new games that I didn't say earlier, but I think particularly for people who haven't played much or if they haven't played in a long time, if they're anything like me, they're going to be very insecure about stepping into a new group or a new game. So I think one important thing is to essentially boost their confidence, however, and say, look, don't worry about all these rules. Don't worry about all these books. Here's what you need to do. You're going to be great as long as you're having fun. We'll get you where you need to go. Don't worry about it, and really make them feel comfortable in that way.
And give them a setting they're familiar with. It was mentioned like the Harry Potter thing. If somebody is familiar with the movies, I'm always referencing the Lord of the Rings movies. If someone's familiar with those, you tell them things like, act as if you were Frodo in this situation, or Gandalf, or whatever it may be. And that can give them a place to work from without needing to know what the rule is to cast the light spell.
But we forget that a lot of players don't know what initiative is or what a perception check is. I mean, that stuff becomes standard quickly when you play, but if you're just coming into a table and you think, oh, I'm the guy that doesn't know this stuff.
And everyone else must know it.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's bad enough it's their first time playing, and it doesn't matter what game system it is.
Right.
Like, because Dungeon World's pretty easy. I can grasp the mechanics,
Right.
But even like my wife and our friend were like, oh,
I don't know what I can do.
I'm like, just do whatever you want to do.
Right.
We'll say yay or nay it.
Joe described that perfectly to us, which is just think of that you're in a movie and describe the scene you want to see.
That's exactly what I do.
So, yeah.
Cool. Mickie, you've been a new player a few times in a few games. What helped make you comfortable at the table?
The rest of the people at the table. Because you need to hear that reassurance that you can make mistakes and it's okay. No one's going to ridicule you too much.
We talked
I was going to say
too badly.
Yeah, we do it behind your back.
Behind my back. Yeah, I thought so.
Only the mistakes, though.
Only the mistakes,
which is like everything.
And I think as a player, if you're going to play this type of game, you need to not take yourself too seriously.
Oh, that's definitely true.
Yes, because to go on the fun, this is a game. We're going to have some fun.
Yes.
Absolutely. You cannot take yourself too seriously because then you're not going to enjoy it and you're going to bum everybody else out and you're going to get kicked out of the game.
No one wants to be a wet blanket.
Well, and I don't think you can enjoy these games if you do take yourself too seriously because you have to imagine that you're a freaking dwarf bard or whatever. I mean, that's,
Or a sheep.
Or a sheep.
And that brings up another thing for me too. Try not to think of the fantasy world as the real world because there is a certain amount of immersion that you want to get into there and you have to have some things that are believable, but there are too many people I think that will flat out say no, that can't happen because oil floats in water. Like that's the only problem you have with this. The dragons, the elves, all that stuff's okay, but you won't let okay, all right.
Yeah.
There's that you have to draw that line where there are some things that you want to be consistent. Physics is decent and chemistry, that kind of thing. However, this is a fantasy world. Things can and do change, and you've got to be able to accept that. And I think that goes along with don't take it all too seriously. Allow the unbelievable to happen because it's happening all the time.
Yep.
Let it happen.
Let it go.
Let it go.
I mean, one of the thing about new games, would be the difference between homebrewing and using published or pre-published adventures.
I wanted to get to that, so good. Yeah.
I mean, for some people, homebrewing is easier because they have a world in mind that they want to play and they've imagined it, and it's easier for them to narrate that game than to try to follow along and keep track of and remember the details in a complicated published adventure. In others, it's much more reassuring to have a book in front of you with encounters and knowing the right number of creatures to put in and enemies to put in each one. And I think that is a personal choice. For me, it's probably in the middle, having a published adventure that lays out the rough outline of an adventure and the types of encounters that we want to have, but then letting me make up a lot of the stuff around it. And
so like some of the campaign books where it tells you what's going on in the area, not so much the adventure module.
Like one of the ideas I've actually had, if after the starter set, if we keep going with 5e, I love the Pathfinder world of Galarian. I like it much more than the Forgotten Realms. And I'd love to do a 5e adventure in Galarian.
No reason you can't.
There's no reason
Yeah.
you can't, right? I mean, if people haven't played Pathfinder, they don't know.
Yeah.
Like
They
for
don't
my
care.
3.5 campaign, I used anything from any world. So I'd have groups that like, well, they only exist in Corvair, they don't exist in Greyhawk. Well, I'm going to use them.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I would only use the
Some
Greyhawk
Dark
map.
Sun.
Yeah, I would only use the Greyhawk map, but I would use different factions and whatever.
Like
Just-
for me, Eberron is by far my favorite setting.
Right.
Cool.
I absolutely love the Eberron setting.
Right.
Cool. That's where like Warforged was.
The Warforged.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think whatever it is that, as if you're leading the game, that makes you feel comfortable and prepared with the least amount of work. And for some people that would be homebrewing, for some people that would be published adventures, and some it'll be a combo.
Well, there's a certain amount of comfort in knowing that you can turn to page 30 to know who's at the inn,
Right.
compared to you got to make it up, write it down, hope you remember later. Yeah,
Right.
there definitely is a big comfort difference
Right.
between those two things.
The other thing is you can homebrew a rough arc, but then take single pieces or modules. You know, back when I was a kid and we played D&D, the modules were much, much smaller than
Gotcha.
what Wizards of the Coast is doing now with 200-page adventures that take a year to play. But there's a lot of that smaller stuff available, like on the DM's Guild or online, that you can get for free or for a couple of bucks. So you can go on and find little adventures you like and essentially piece them together to make your own campaign.
Definitely.
Very inexpensive, very flexible, very fun, without necessarily feeling like you're tied to 200 pages of a set campaign.
Or you can always ask your players, like, what do you guys want to do? Or what do you want to, they could, I want to research this, or I need to go do this. All right, that's an idea for a module like next week,
Exactly.
What do you think about that idea, Mickie? As a player, do you want to contribute to the world that much, or do you just want to write your story from your character's perspective while you're playing?
I prefer to write my story from the character's perspective. I mean, my character will influence the world by how awesome she is.
Exactly.
The rest,
But you
it's
don't.
just there.
You would rather have the DM or whomever have the world there for you, and then you interact with it.
Yeah, I'm lazy that way, I guess. I would prefer that
Yeah.
because, right, so it's like coloring within the lines, right? The DM sets the world, and it's my job to figure out how to break it.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of, again, if you have a DM who's flexible, I don't know whether it's a room with a portal to essentially very different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And then your players can pick, for a while we're going to be in an Eberron type world or a Dark Sun type world or in,
Sure.
whatever. And then you still have it in your home world, your core world, wherever it is that you're comfortable, but you have the option to go out and say, you know what, we're going to go to this crazy place, or we're going to go off and do this crazy thing, which may be gothic horror or something for a little bit, but then we still get back to our core. And that gives you have control of the world generally, but your players can kind of pick, like, for the next month, I'd like to kind of go this way. Or
Yeah.
I think
That
it's
would
a
be
pretty
really
cool
neat.
idea. Yeah.
So like a central point with multiple doors where they go in and out.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you went into a room with a wizard and there were 4 portals, and he tells you what's through each portal, and you get to pick.
That'd be cool.
And you're like, maybe there's an artifact you need from
Each
Right.
one.
you don't, or whatever.
Or the adventure is to find something that lets you get back.
Within a
Right.
designated
Yeah.
time period. Otherwise, you're stuck there forever.
Forever.
And as the DM, you would pick things that you were willing to run and play, but that would also give you the players enough variety that they could choose. I want to be in a Western world for a while, or I want to be in a Shadowrun world for a while,
Or a Fey world.
Fey
or-
world, yeah, whatever works.
I keep saying someday I want to do a Wild West game. Maybe we can.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Women
We sort
settled
of
the
kind of
West.
did with the Idara.
It kind of one of the things I've always felt with Wild West though is I haven't found any system that to me encapsulates all of the Wild West stuff. If you get shot once, you're down. Nobody gets shot more than once in a Western.
Right.
A good guy or bad guy. You get shot once, you're down. Whether you're dead or not, that's different. But you're down. You're ineffective after you get shot once. It is only very rarely that someone gets grazed, and it's always on, I think, their left shoulder.
Right.
Right?
Unless you're wearing that plate from the stove. Remember?
That's
Well, yeah, I guess that could happen too. But yeah, I want that kind of lethality, but still have a playable game, which
That's
kind of makes it tough.
to do though,
Yeah.
because once your characters die, then what happens?
Yeah,
Like each
that's a tricky
person would
part.
have to have multiple characters ready.
Could be.
Well, see, that just requires a shift in your thinking. So, like, your hit points aren't the amount of damage you can take until you die. They're more the amount of stamina you have to keep going. So once you're reduced to 0 hit points, you're just bone tired.
Incapacitated.
The cuts and the bruises of just amounted to you needing to rest now.
Right. Interesting.
Neat. What other new stuff? What other things do we want to capture? I mean, it's a new year. Happy New Year still. Because it's only like 45 minutes after we said it last time.
Me being new coming in the group, are there any games, you guys have played a lot of games, are there any games you guys haven't played? Like, man, I wouldn't mind trying that out.
The whole world of games
like, for example,
out
you mentioned Western, like Boot Hill, and maybe
Yeah.
you can't find that, but that's crazy. But just something like, man, I wouldn't mind trying out that type of game or that specific game.
Like I said, I honestly cannot wait until we do an urban fantasy sort of game.
I think I would like to have one like that too, where we're playing in a mostly modern world, if not the actual world we're in, with fantasy thrown in.
Yep.
I want that to happen as well. It's along the Dresden Files or Iron Druid type of idea, and I definitely want to do that. I think also space. Except for Star Wars, we haven't done much in space, and I'd like to try that. We've got a couple of options, both trying Star Wars again and
Star Trek.
The Star Trek, which we are, I think, officially signed up for the alpha test, and hopefully we'll be playing that. And you may hear it on the podcast sometime within a few weeks of this recording, possibly. Depends on how it works out. And then we've also got, along the Gumshoe line, I have the Ashen Stars, which is another of the Gumshoe games, but it is set in space. So that's one thing I think I'd like to explore more. Although my home base is the medieval fantasy type stuff.
Renaissance fantasy.
Yeah.
You know what would be interesting? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Doctor Who. A Doctor Who-based adventures, because that would bring steampunk, time travel,
And
space,
I was gonna say
Yeah, it
steampunk.
feels
all
a lot
into
of
one.
Yeah, it feels a lot of.
Steampunk would be
Categories.
fun. I'd love to play a cyberpunk. I'd love to play Shadowrun without learning Shadowrun.
Without the rules.
It's just too rules heavy
Well,
for
there's
me.
a dungeon
But I want to
world.
play in that world.
There's a Dungeon World hack for that. You play in the Shadowrun world with Dungeon World rules.
I would also love to play like a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, way before, where you have
Shut
Jedi
it,
and Sith.
meatbag.
But but I don't want to play in the Luke Skywalker era.
Gotcha.
Which is really space.
Yeah.
And to me, Jedi and Sith.
Well, it's like
that's-
it's
space
sci-fi
op-
fantasy.
Yeah, it's like
but
space opera.
Exactly.
Right.
'cause there's
I've
still
always said
technically
Star
like
Wars is
the
more-
magic element of the Force and things like that.
Yeah.
People using lightsabers.
You get the telekinesis and lightsabers and blaster fire. And,
Well, I've always argued it. I mean, it's not my original idea, but Star Wars is much more fantasy than sci-fi.
No, I'm right
So,
with her.
I mean, sci-fi is really about technology.
Yeah.
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 And that's
And
not
all the
what
technology in Star Wars is kind of inconspicuous because they didn't have very good technology when they made the movies.
Right.
There's just flashing lights and beeping and R2D2 plugging into stuff. Kurt's really got a pee, I think.
No. I was just gonna say I love playing new games, at least trying them. So I mean, basically anything anyone wants to play, if only for 3 or 4 hours, I'm always going to be game for trying. I'm doing that with board games now. I've gotten really into board games in the last 6 months. I'm just loving trying any new game. I'll play it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of. Although I'd rather have the mechanics are easier. You want to take time to like put all this time into like this game where like, ooh, this is going to be complex and kind of messy, and we're going to like trip over ourselves on it.
That's happened.
Yeah.
I've got
Talk about.
I felt like although the recordings came out really well, there was no way I was getting Idara. The system, it just was never clicking for me. Although we were able to play it and it was a lot of fun, the system was just overwhelming for my brain to handle for pretty much a one-shot for us.
Right.
But it was a blast, and that I think is part of Chris's point there. If the system is overwhelming, it makes it hard to actually create something and work with it and actually have fun with it.
Right.
I think that's where even though the system for Dresden Files is fairly complex, I think the urban fantasy aspect of it will help keep everyone kind of grounded.
That's a cool piece.
It is good, right?
Shall we wrap it up?
I think we can.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your listening. I enjoy these sidebars. It's just a chance to chat amongst ourselves and talk about gaming.
Directly to our listeners.
And this is the type of episode you'll actually listen to.
I do.
That's right.
Yes, I will. I always listen to the sidebars.
Yeah. How about you, Mickie? Do you listen to any of them?
I listen to you guys every time I'm here. What are you talking about?
She prefers the live version.
I prefer the live
not
version.
the Memorex.
But as long as we're reaching out to fans, I want to hear from more women. Like most of the people who've written into the podcasts are guys.
We
I
had
know there
one.
were chicks. There was one who...
And she had started her own campaign.
Exactly. She
and
was going to
yeah.
DM. I want to hear... I want an update.
I'll reach out to her and see
Yeah.
if there's any update on her campaign. 'Cause
And
it was
my
some
other
pretty
chicks out
ballsy
there.
Stuff. Yeah.
I know there's more of us. Speak up!
Yeah, definitely. adventuresfromtheshed@gmail.com. Of course, find us on Facebook as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Everyone have a great beginning to 2017. Thanks for listening.
Forget New Year's
listening.
resolutions. They suck.
Anything else, Mickie?
Are we going to do vagina for 2017?
I try to do vagina more than just 2017.
Oh, okay. Equal opportunity. Vagina!
Bye.
The preceding podcast was brought to you by One Joe Young. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.